Tonight, reflecting on the dark legacy of Canada's residential school system. A nationwide commemoration.
Remember the children that have lost, the children that are still here, and the children to come.
And what a Saskatchewan First Nation is doing to educate future generations.
Indigenous tourism is reconciliation in action.
New marching orders at an unprecedented gathering of top U.S. military leaders.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses.
Plus, how Donald Trump took aim at Canada and shut out from enemy territory. The rival team taking a swing at Canadian fans, and how the Jays are hitting back.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. A profound national reckoning today to confront a blight on Canada's past, the painful legacy of the residential school system 150,000 Indigenous children attended, and where an estimated 6,000 died. Wearing orange shirts to honor them, hundreds gathered for the opening of a new so-called Museum of Conscience in Brantford, Ontario, to remember the past. It's on the very site of Canada's longest continuous residential school. The Anglican Church ran the Mohawk Institute from 1828 to 1970. Just one of many cities marking this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. CTV's Abigail Beeman starts us off.
A healing walk and powwow in Winnipeg, while in Vancouver, a growing presence each year for the Truth and Reconciliation event.
That means people are listening to us, listening to Indigenous people and our history.
Right across the country, thousands pause to mark the day in meaningful ways.
Remember the children that have lost, the children that are still here, and the children to come.
Lots of orange shirts and so many beautiful buildings.
On Parliament Hill, it's Sage and her family's first time in Ottawa for the national ceremony.
To show our daughter that we never forget what happened to our ancestors.
They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds.
Bless the survivors and let them know those that are in the spirit world and those who are here. We hold them in our heart with love.
It has been 10 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released their 94 calls to action. And now experts say only about a dozen have been completed and just about 40 more in progress. So part of today's message is to reinforce that there's still significant work ahead now with a new government.
We look to Prime Minister Carney to see if he makes sure that there's action in the budget for First Nations and to make sure that there's no cuts, because the gaps are so huge.
We are building together in health, in education, in economic opportunity, in housing, upholding Indigenous rights.
What I would love to see is more people that will accept us, because a lot of places with us natives, we're struggling.
A day for learning and listening.
I was not allowed to speak my language or learned the traditional ways of my people.
On a long road to heal the hurt and offer better for the next generations. Abigail Beeman, CTV News, Ottawa.
And a reminder, there's a national crisis line if you're a former residential school student or a family member. It's available 24/7 at 1-866-925-4419. And later in the show, we'll take you to a Saskatchewan First Nation turning to tourism to help educate Canadians. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper is honoring the memory of his former Chief of Staff, Nigel Wright. In a post on social media, Harper wrote, "A unique and deeply accomplished person, Nigel combined intellectual acumen with incredible capacity for work." Wright became Harper's Chief of Staff in 2011, but resigned 2 years later after he secretly wrote Conservative Senator Mike Duffy a $90,000 check to cover questionable living expense claims. The Ethics Commissioner determined the payment broke government rules, but Wright was not criminally charged. He returned to private life with the private equity firm Onyx, where he worked until he died. Nigel Wright was 62. The Prime Minister also posting tonight that he benefited often from Wright's counsel and long been inspired by his dedication to our country. A country that has received yet another blow from Donald Trump in the form of new tariffs on softwood lumber and new threats on other industries. And as CTV's Colton Prail reports, Trump is again digging in with his attacks on Canada's sovereignty.
For this Calgary carpenter, Donald Trump's latest tariffs are another rough patch.
Where am I going to go? Who am I going to sell to? It does add that little bit of extra stress.
Last night, the president signed an executive order for a 25% tariff on furniture and cabinets starting October 14th, and a new 10% tariff on softwood lumber on top of existing 35% anti-dumping duties on Canada. For Harley Griffin, it's already led to one American customer asking to return their purchase.
Now I have to deal with getting it back from them, making sure it's in good condition, paying taxes on the back end, coming back across the border, and then I have to eat all that cost.
And as Trump readies new salvos that could hurt the Canadian economy, he also returned to an old talking point around his planned North American missile defense system.
Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51.
Meanwhile, Trump is threatening more tariffs on movies, medium and heavy-duty trucks, and pharmaceuticals, warning the move could raise drug prices in other countries. Some experts say Canadians are unlikely to see the impact of price changes, but availability could become an issue.
I don't think there's any way to avoid that. And anything that causes disruption in the global supply chain is going to affect access to medicines in Canada.
Today, drug maker Pfizer announced plans to reshore $70 billion of production to the United States. That could impact Brandon, Manitoba, home to Pfizer's Canadian production hub.
The president graciously gave us a 3-year grace period that we will not be subject to the 232 tariffs, as long as, of course, we move the products here.
The Prime Minister's office wouldn't provide new comments on Trump's most recent 51st state remarks. But political watchers say it's a distraction technique to shift focus away from a possible government shutdown in Washington. Omar.
And Colton, that shutdown going from possible to likely tonight. Thank you. Donald Trump revived those 51st state comments at a meeting hundreds of America's most seasoned military commanders around the world were ordered to attend today. It was part pep rally and part lecture about rebranding the American military. And as CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon reports, it came with an ultimatum.
An extraordinary gathering of America's top military brass, summoned by the now Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who told commanders the military has gone soft.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that shit.
The former Fox News anchor slammed what he called fat generals.
Either you are disciplined, fit, and trained, or you are out.
Promising to weed out political correctness and bring back a warrior-like culture, a return, he said, to the highest male standards for combat positions.
If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it.
And that was just the warm-up act. President Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief, in a long, rambling, off-script speech about war and the Nobel Peace Prize, suggested using American cities as a training ground for troops.
San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds.
Trump has deployed the National Guard to Portland, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. to crack down on crime, sending active Marines to Los Angeles despite protests from officials there.
It should scare us all. This is something that we just don't do in America. We have police forces to fight crime, and we should be putting money into those police forces, not sending American troops that are trained for war to American cities.
Some military officials expressed concern, but the message to commanders was blunt: embrace the new MAGA vision or resign. Omar?
All right, Joy, thank you. And Donald Trump says time is running out for Hamas to respond to his peace plan aimed at ending the nearly 2-year-old war in Gaza.
How long do you plan to give Hamas to respond to the ceasefire proposal you put out?
Well, we're going to do about 3 or 4 days. We'll see how it is.
Israel has already approved the plan, which demands Hamas release all of its hostages in 72 hours and disarm in return for Israel withdrawing from much of Gaza. Nearly a dozen Arab and Muslim-majority countries have expressed support for the deal, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. Hamas says it is still studying the terms of the proposal. At least 31 people are dead after a powerful offshore earthquake struck the central Philippines. The magnitude 6.9 quake toppled structures, knocked out power, and sent people scrambling from their homes. The region is still recovering from a storm that hit on Friday, leaving at least 27 people dead. Back here at home, a wildfire burning out of control has prompted evacuations in Nova Scotia's Annapolis Valley.
Monday, conditions changed, winds picked up, and the fire shifted back to out of control, which means it is growing or could easily grow. That's why DNR recommended evacuations. The municipality issued evacuation orders supported by the Department of Emergency Management.
Officials say more evacuations are possible as dry and windy conditions threaten to fuel the fire. Water bombers from New Brunswick and the Northwest Territories are helping with the firefight, and planes from Quebec are on the way. Funding to temporarily house asylum seekers in hotels across Canada ended today, and advocates believe the result could be a resurgence of homeless refugees on the streets of Canada's largest cities. CTV's Adrian Gobriel shares the perspective of those preparing for the worst.
This is where we housed over 500 men.
Wow. In the summer of 2023, when the number of asylum claimants sleeping on the streets outside this downtown Toronto shelter became too large to ignore.
But this is my shelter. Yeah, this is my house now.
Pastor Judith James opened up her church, Revival Time Tabernacle.
We had to put drapes across these poles here to house women on this side.
To give hundreds fleeing a number of African nations somewhere safe to rest their heads for 2 months.
Just making sure that they were given a level of peace in the midst of their trauma.
Today, temporary federal funding to house asylum seekers in hotels across the country ended. Pastor James is fearful history could repeat itself.
Some have gotten jobs, some haven't. Some have been able to get housing, which we're grateful for, but some have not, because there were so many that came in.
Previously pitched as a stopgap in the face of historic surges in migration, Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada says the federal government has spent roughly $1.1 billion on temporary housing at hotels like this one in Toronto's North End on asylum seekers since 2020. Yet Toronto's mayor says the federal government is still shortchanging Canada's largest city.
And the city is short by $107 million.
West of Toronto, this asylum intake center is nearly full, according to those we spoke with who are staying here. With homeless shelters near capacity in many urban centers and hotel funding no longer an option, some advocates believe Canada is abandoning those we welcomed in.
It is not just an initial take-in, it has to be the systems funneling to ensure that they're served with dignity. Dignity is what humanity deserves.
Just how many asylum claimants are still searching for permanent housing remains unclear. We've asked Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. We're still awaiting a response. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Mississauga, Ontario.
Alberta is offering parents money and a do-it-yourself home curriculum guide as 51,000 teachers in the province are set to strike on Monday.
Our government will not leave 700,000 Alberta students and their families without resources as the union advances towards a strike.
If it goes ahead, the province is promising an online toolkit if parents wish to teach their kids at home. And they'd be given $30 a day for children aged 12 and under. But the payments would only start on October 31st. Meantime, the Premier's cross-province tour ended on a tense note after a staffer lashed out at a student who criticized the government after teachers voted to reject the province's offer.
I applaud you coming here to speak. I don't applaud how you're trying to speak. It's not making any sense. I know you'd love some chaos, but your parents should turn you over your knee. Let's go over here.
Today, Bruce McAllister, the executive director of the Premier's office, apologized for what he called an inappropriate remark and for suggesting the teen's parents should spank the teen. In BC, police are investigating after shots were fired at a radio station that services Metro Vancouver's South Asian community last night.
Everyone has a right to go to work and be safe.
Radio host and former provincial politician Ginny Sims says no one was injured, and police say no one was inside when bullets struck the front door of Radio Swift 1200 AM in Surrey. Investigators believe the shooting is, quote, extortion related. Over in Atlantic Canada, all 3 sperm whales stranded off PEI's North Shore have now died. CTV's Maria Saru has more on the growing concern from marine officials tonight. And Maria, what do we know?
Omar, the sperm whales were spotted far away in the waters behind me off the coast of PEI's East Bideford. Colossal creatures stranded where surf meets sand. These animals swim in deep waters, so seeing 3 this close to the shore is really strange.
We're not sure if the animals simply got confused and sort of made a wrong turn, or if there's something underlying in terms of their health.
Tanya Wimmer with Mars, the Marine Animal Response Society, says boaters reported the whales Saturday evening. 1 died that night, another the next day. The whales are too heavy for humans to move, and the right safety equipment can't go where they're located. So now Wimmer says responders' hands are tied.
It is an absolutely heartbreaking decision to have to make in terms of letting nature take its course.
She adds Mars is working with its partners to try and do necropsies, seeking clues about injury, illness, or something else. Omar.
All right, Maria, thank you. Coming up.
Our community leaders have talked about tourism as a catalyst for cultural regeneration.
How a Saskatchewan First Nation is welcoming the world. One of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action is fostering Indigenous tourism to promote cultural education and economic development. CTV's Alison Bamford traveled to a Saskatchewan First Nation doing just that.
A trail ride in the heart of Treaty 6 territory, but this group is doing more than just exploring. They're at the first battle site of the Northwest Resistance, one of several historic landmarks located on Beardy's and Okamasas Cree Nation.
As far back as 1988, our community leaders have talked about tourism as a catalyst for cultural regeneration, language revitalization, and sharing stories.
And since 2018, that's what Pemiska Tourism has been doing, sharing the First Nations history through guided tours, cultural programming, traditional foods, and treaty education. This summer was their busiest yet, with visitors from around the world and right next door coming to stay in their teepee-inspired lodges.
Pemiska actually means come and find it in Cree. So it's really an invitation for guests to come into Beardy's and to experience Indigenous culture.
This is the site of the former St. Michael's Indian Residential School. Typically, it's the first stop on Pemiska's historical tours. And today, it's where the community is gathering to mark the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
We've been saying for years that Indigenous tourism is reconciliation in action.
The 2015 TRC calls to action include recommendations to foster Indigenous tourism as a driver for cultural education and economic development. Pemiska Tourism employs about 5 permanent staff. Macy Gardepee is one of them. She grew up in Beardy's but never really knew the history.
This was a really great opportunity for myself, as well as for a lot of our community members to have that access.
Access to history that leaders say is helping the nation heal. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Beardy's and Okamasas Cree Nation.
Still ahead. The tit-for-tat restrictions on playoff baseball tickets. A bitter rival of the Blue Jays is shutting out Canadian fans from buying tickets should a playoff showdown with New York come to fruition. The Yankees are facing heat for restricting ticket sales to fans from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. And the Jays also plan on continuing to restrict purchases to Canadian billing addresses to keep tickets in the hands of fans here. Meanwhile, today, Jays star George Springer got some extra incentive to take the team to the top.
Hey, George. We heard you're looking for a ride down Bremner. We just might have the horse for you. So if the Toronto Blue Jays can bring the World Series back to Toronto, this Blue Jay just might give you that ride.
Well, the offer comes after Springer vowed to ride through Toronto on a horse to celebrate the team's division title. With that box checked, Toronto police said today they'll make it happen if the Jays go all the way. Still ahead, reflections from residential school survivors. This is a day to listen as we reflect on the past and take steps forward on the long road to reconciliation. CTV's Alex Karpa spoke to residential school survivors about that journey.
Vivian Ketchum often comes to this park near her apartment to reflect.
The Presbyterian Church is a church that ran the school that I attended to.
Ketchum is a residential school survivor, having attended the Cecilia Jeffrey Residential School just outside of Kenora, Ontario. She was 5 years old when she was taken from her family.
The homesickness that still haunts me today, the bad food.
The federal government implemented September 30th as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in June 2021, following the discovery of 215 unmarked graves at the grounds of a former residential school in Kamloops, BC. Ketchum says this day is important to her, but says recognition for survivors like herself should not just be limited to one day.
We're here all throughout the year. We're living with our memories and our stories. Come out and talk to us. Yeah, our stories matter all through the year.
Residential school survivor Geraldine Shingoose has been sharing her past for over a decade, but says conversations about it are still hard.
I want them to know the impact it had on me as a child when I was going to residential school. That was really hard.
Indigenous leaders say there's still more that can be done to honor survivors.
Making sure that there's a First Nations course in every single university and college across this country, so when professionals are graduating, that they remember and know the true history of what had happened to First Nations people in this country.
Both Ketchum and Shingu say they speak out whenever they can to remind Canadians about the horrible experiences they endured and to make sure their stories about residential school never disappear. Alex Karpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
So important to keep those lessons of history and those stories alive. And that's a snapshot of this Tuesday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast. Canada's #1 newscast for excellence in journalism.
We begin tonight with breaking news.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina, winner of the Canadian Screen Award for Best National Newscast. Watch weeknights at 11.